Have you ever heard a sound in the middle of the night that just felt wrong? A sound that your brain immediately tells you shouldn't be there? This is a story about that kind of sound and about a man named Eric who, to this day, refuses to talk about it after the sun goes down. Eric was a pretty ordinary guy. He lived by himself in a small rental house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't some spooky cabin deep in the woods or anything like that. It was just a regular house, but it was far enough from the neighbors that the nights were incredibly quiet. You know, that kind of quiet where every single creak of the floorboards or hum of an appliance seems to echo through the space. Eric worked the late shift at a local warehouse, so his routine was a little different from most people's. He'd usually get home around 1:30 in the morning, when the rest of the world was asleep. One particular night, after a really long and draining shift, Eric pulled into his driveway, feeling completely wiped out. He unlocked his front door, tossed his keys onto the little table in the entryway, and headed straight for the kitchen. All he wanted was a cold glass of water before crashing into bed. The house was dead silent. No TV, no music, just the faint, low hum of the refrigerator. It was the same silence he came home to every night, but this time something broke it. A knock. It wasn't a quick, friendly rap. It was slow, heavy, deliberate. Each knock landed with a weight that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Eric froze, glass in hand. Who would be knocking on his door at this hour? He never had visitors, especially not in the middle of the night. He glanced at his phone. The screen glowed back at him, 1:47 a.m. He stood there, listening, his heart starting to beat a little faster. Then it came again, 2 knocks. Exactly the same as before, slow, heavy, purposeful, then silence. A thick, expectant silence that felt even louder than the knocking had. Trying to rationalize it, Eric quietly made his way to the front door. Maybe it was a delivery driver at the wrong address, or a neighbor in trouble. He tiptoed over and peered through the peephole. The porch light cast a pale yellow glow over his empty porch. There was no one there, not a soul in sight. He scanned the street, but it was deserted. A wave of relief mixed with a little embarrassment washed over him. He chuckled to himself, thinking he was just tired and letting his imagination get the better of him. Wrong house, he mumbled, turning away from the door. He walked back to the kitchen, feeling a bit foolish for being so spooked. But just as he was about to finally take that sip of water, the sound returned. This time, it was louder, more insistent. 2 heavy knocks, followed by a short pause, and then 2 more. The force of it seemed to shake the door in its frame. The playful fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard knot of dread in his chest. This didn't feel like a mistake anymore. It felt intentional. Eric walked back to the door, his steps much slower this time. His voice was shaky as he called out, "Who is it?" The silence that answered him was absolute. No response. No one shuffling their feet or clearing their throat. Just nothing. But then he heard something else. Something that made every hair on his arms stand on end. Breathing. It wasn't a gasp or a pant, but a low, steady sound of air being drawn in and let out. And it was close. Terrifyingly close. It sounded like someone had their face pressed right against the other side of the door, their mouth just inches from where he was standing. The sound was so intimate, so invasive, it felt like it was right next to his ear. Pure instinct took over. Eric backed away from the door, his eyes wide, his own breathing now hitched and shallow. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Without another thought, he retreated to his bedroom at the back of the house, his gaze fixed on the front door as if he expected it to burst open. He shut his bedroom door and locked it, the click of the lock sounding ridiculously small and insufficient. He sat on the edge of his bed, his body trembling, straining his ears to hear anything over the frantic pounding of his own heart. The knocking at the front door had stopped. He waited, holding his breath, Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. The house was silent again. Had they left? Was it over? And then he heard it. Footsteps. But they weren't outside on the porch. They were inside the house. They were slow, heavy steps, dragging slightly on the hardwood floor of his hallway. Someone was in his house. Someone had gotten in without breaking the door down, without shattering a window. The steps moved methodically, deliberately, down the hall, getting closer and closer to his bedroom. Frantically, Eric dialed 911, his voice a choked whisper as he tried to explain what was happening. He told the dispatcher someone was in his house, that he was locked in his bedroom. While he was still on the line, the footsteps stopped. They stopped right outside his bedroom door. He stared at the bottom of the door, where a thin sliver of light from the hallway crept in. A shadow fell across that light, blocking it out completely. Something or someone was standing right there. He held his breath, listening to the dispatcher's calm voice on the phone, a voice that felt a million miles away. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud or heavy like before. It was soft, almost gentle. 2 quiet taps right on his bedroom door, from inside his own home. The wail of sirens cut through the night just moments later. Eric had never been so relieved to hear a sound in his life. The police arrived, their flashlights cutting beams through the darkness. They announced their presence, their voices firm and commanding. With the police there, Eric finally found the courage to unlock his door. They swept through the house, room by room. They checked every window, every closet, the attic, the basement. Everything was secure. Every door and window was locked from the inside, with no signs of forced entry. The front door was still double-bolted, just as Eric had left it. There was no one there. The house was empty. The officers were patient, but they couldn't find any explanation. As they were about to leave, one of the officers pointed his flashlight at the front door, the one that had been knocked on from the outside. There, on the wooden door frame, just beside the peephole, were 2 small marks carved lightly into the wood. They were perfectly shaped, perfectly spaced. They looked exactly like the indentations that would be left by a pair of knuckles. Eric didn't sleep in that house again. He packed a bag that night and stayed with a friend, and the very next day he moved out. He broke his lease, not caring about the cost. He never went back. He tells this story to very few people, and he will never understand what happened that night. The police had no answers. He has no answers. But the one question that still haunts him, the one that keeps him awake on quiet nights, is this. If the front door was locked the entire time, how did someone get inside to knock on his bedroom door? And whose knuckles left those marks on the outside? Thanks for listening to this story. If you have any unexplained experiences of your own, I'd love to read them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content just like it. Stay safe out there.